pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the approval of the agenda.
Move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Nick?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Honoring excellence, Mr. Ackerman.
Good to see everyone again tonight. Have another great honoring excellence to close out the 22-23 school year. We're going to begin things. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. D. Rosecrans and Dr. Andrea Dixon-Seahorn as they're going to introduce us to our latest cohort for Grow Your Own Teachers. So we look forward to learning more about the program and then meeting our recipients.
Good evening to all of you. Dee and I, we've been working on this endeavor together since its inception, and so we felt it was important to present together on this evening. My role is to just give some background and context for the LPS Grow Your Own program, especially because we do have some new board members. So the LPS Grow Your Own Teacher program is part of the district's strategic efforts to address the national shortage of high-quality teacher candidates. A primary focus of our program is to identify and cultivate aspiring educators from among our own high school seniors, particularly those students of color. The vision for the Grow Your Own Teacher program was ignited in 2016 when LPS was introduced to the Missouri's plan to ensure equitable access to excellent educators. A district representative from the LPS HR department served on the Missouri's Educator Equity Committee, where this state-level work resulted in the publication of a resource guide to creating your own teacher pipeline. While in its preliminary stages of development, the ideation of the LPS Grow Your Own program led to a special recognition from the Garrison School Cultural Center, who presented our district with the 2017 Response to the Call Award for listening to the community and developing a strategy to build a teacher pipeline as well as increase the diversity of its certified staff. I would like to publicly recognize the dedicated members of the Grow Your Own Teacher Steering Committee, which is co-chaired by myself and Mr. D. Rosecrans. And those committee members include Ms. Bridget Herman, Dr. Mike Sharp, both from LHS, Dr. Precious Kirk, and Dr. Rosemary Kemp from Liberty North, Dr. Dwayne Smith, Melissa Taylor, who is the EIP coordinator, and Ms. Colleen Jones. Dee?
Thank you. All through the years since its inception, we have lived by two guiding principles for Grow Your Own. And if you pardon my abbreviation, I'm going to from now on just say GYOT. Those guiding principles are highlight education, the education profession, as a viable career choice for LPS students of color, and award a financial incentive to be applied toward college tuition. The students we will introduce you to here in just a moment have survived a very rigorous application process, including completing an actual LPS employment application, that's rigorous in and of itself, achieving a minimum, and by a minimum, these students have far exceeded the 2.7 grade point average that is required. They also have blown out of the water the minimum score of at least an 18 on the ACT. They have submitted 3 letters of recommendation. They have written an essay, and probably the worst in the process is they had to interview with us, the members of the GYOT steering committee. We can be kind of a tough group sometimes, not really. Each of these future teachers will receive a scholarship of $2,500 per academic year toward the cost of college tuition. These funds are renewable for a period of up to 4 academic years. In exchange for those scholarship funds, the recipients must satisfy all the requirements outlined in the Grow Your Own Teachers Agreement. After graduation from college, the recipients return to Liberty School District as full-time teachers for a minimum of 3 school years. In the event that a student is unable to meet the GYOT requirements, because life does happen, he or she agrees to repay the full amount of the GYOT loan forgiveness funds they received to that date. Through 12 special education. It is now my honor and privilege to, let's switch sides here, to introduce our GYOT award winners. Our second annual gathering of all of our GYOT recipients. The first cadre is coming back. We'll have graduated, 2 of them will have graduated from college, and stay tuned for that. And the Board of Education has been invited to that. It's a Thursday, June 1st. Come and go. We have an exciting program, but we just want these students to see that they're part of a growing group of students who are going to make their impact on future students in Liberty Public Schools. So with that, please join me in applauding and welcoming. When this is concluded, students, we'll just take you out so we can get a picture and capture it for posterity, okay?
Thank you. Yep. And yeah, like Mr. Rosecrans shared, after we take a break, when I make these final 2 presentations, we'll be sure to get a photo with the 6 of you out in the Commons area. So I'm excited about the next portion here, and this is something I was telling Angela and Wendy a little bit earlier. We haven't been able to get our Support Employee of the Year and our Teacher of the Year together at our board meeting, and it's probably been a handful of years. And tonight, we get to do that, and I'm going to introduce both Angela and Wendy. I thought the 2 of them, how about the 2 of you come up together as our LPS. I'm just going to read a couple of things, and if you had a chance, Corey Thompson, our videographer, did a great job with a couple of our videos that we were able to share out after those presentations. I wanted to talk about Angela first. Is we were at Shoal Creek Elementary, what started as a Jim Reed photo op on the playground, ended up with Dr. Tucker and I on the rooftop of Shoal Creek, and we made the official announcement at Shoal Creek in front of nearly 800 stars, I guess.
A lot of kids.
A lot of kids a lot of stars at Shoal Creek. But I thought I would just read a couple of paragraphs. Mrs. Benner is a longtime elementary teacher in LPS, spending the past 5 years teaching 4th grade at Shoal Creek. Previously, she was a Spanish teacher from 05 to 09, and then a kindergarten, 4th grade, and 5th grade teacher from 09 to 18 at Lewis and Clark Elementary, and I know they were excited, the Trailblazers, to see you get that award. I'm going to quote Principal Bowman. I know she's here tonight. Christy, are you okay if I put words in your mouth right now? According to Christy Bowman, Angela is a ball of energy and works tirelessly to create meaningful learning experiences for her students. What I appreciate most about Angela is her ability to connect with every child and develop their unique strengths. Not only do kids thrive academically under her instruction, but she builds each child up so much that their confidence soars. And I know she was at Jeff City at the Teacher of the Year clinic this last Friday. We'll find out if she's one of the regional Teacher of the Years coming up later this summer, and regardless, she's going to represent us well. And what I've learned the last few weeks, she's very competitive, so I think we're in good hands there. So, and then the week before, we were at Kellybrook, and that was an absolute blast to recognize Wendy Smith. We did an interview before we went to the gym. I learned a lot about Wendy, realized that she's a Liberty girl through and through. Starting back in 1990, she started her fingerprints on Liberty Public Schools, which is really neat, and a wonderful lady and a great representative of this award. Ms. Smith originally joined the LPS family, as I said, back in 1990, and has served in several capacities over the past 3 decades, including paraprofessional, substitute teacher, ISS teacher, and her current position as a school social worker. According to Dr. Andrea Wilson, who again is with us tonight in the back, thank you for being here. She says, Wendy goes above and beyond each day, night, summer, all the time. She is a 24/7, 365 support for our families, from gathering groceries, finding housing, helping with finances, securing daycare, and meeting emergent needs. Wendy is all things to everyone in need. Nothing gets better than Wendy Smith, and I think that says it all right there. She is truly the best, and we are so excited to again have these two together to introduce to you. I know a few of you were able to make it, and we appreciate that, but also understand that schedules are busy, and we're just so excited to have both of them here, and we'll look forward to celebrating them here in a few minutes. So let me introduce our Teacher of the Year, Angela Benner, and Support Employee of the Year, Wendy Smith. Congratulations. And I am going to wrap up. This just came across recently. I know Karen was at the Worlds of Fun event. The whole thing about this is it pays to be kind. And this was the 33rd Annual Kindness Kansas Cityan Awards presented by Synergy Services just a few weeks ago. May 5th is when that took place. I'm going to read a little bit of their press release, just a paragraph. Being kind can go a long way, but many times it's not recognized. Now in its 33rd year, the Kindest Kansas Cityan Awards were created to do just that. This year, we're truly celebrating the Kansas City kindness we all know and love by highlighting the kindness people, restaurants, businesses, and unforgettable moments of kindness right here in KC. As part of the event, they honored the 20 kindest Kansas Cityans nominated by students ranging from kindergarten to seniors in high school. They also spotlighted the winner of the Rita Blitt Kindest School Award for their out-of-this-world example of kindness in action right here in our community. And speaking of that, as part of the evening at Worlds of Fun, Liberty Public Schools was announced and introduced as the 2023 Rita Blitt Kindest School, or in this case, district. So a wonderful recognition. They sent a beautiful plaque over that we'll display proudly. Is that audience? That's the Zambezi Zinger right there. Hop aboard. just wanted to share that. Again, with this time of year, with so many awards and recognitions, just one that we thought we would highlight tonight and appreciate. I know Colleen Jones was there, Jessica Meisenheimer, and others. So, and as we wrap up the school year, I think we'll probably be on a little bit of a summer hiatus with recognitions, but I did want to mention that we certainly look forward to recognizing our retiring staff coming up tomorrow at Liberty High School in the Performing Arts Center. Earlier, we were calculating nearly 800 years of service dedicated to Liberty Public Schools with our combined number of, we'll have 20, I believe 21 retirees in attendance with us tomorrow night. Again, 4:30 at the in the Commons at Liberty High, and then we'll start the program at 5 o'clock. And I know Ms. Reed and Dr. Tucker will help with those presentations, and we look forward to that. So again, that will conclude Honoring Excellence for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. As we typically do, we'll take a 12-minute break to put us to 7:30 to come out and congratulate and greet and pat you on the back for wonderful jobs well done. And then following that, there'll be public comment. So if there's anyone out there that wishes to make a public comment, cards are available in the hallway and can be given to any of us or Ms. Aldrich. So with that,
Well, that's true. That's true.
You know, that's another reason why I just wear plain clothes, because you don't know how often I wear them.
They used to be Friday pants.
Is there such thing as Jean Friday still?
Nah, it's
All week long.
That's all. Good, everybody?
All right.
When I wear
Public
what?
comment.
Appreciate
Speakers may address any subject concerning Liberty Public Schools and/or education. Board members will not engage in debates or discussions with those speaking other than to seek clarification of their comments. Speakers will address the board from the podium, are asked to keep remarks concise and to the point, and will not repeat what someone before has said. A person or persons may speak only once at the meeting. If several patrons wish to speak on the same topic, the board president may restrict the input to one or two spokespersons. Each speaker shall be limited to 3 minutes. Profane language or comments that constitute a threat to the safety of others is prohibited. Spontaneous comments from the audience will not be tolerated and may close public comment. In the event board members agree to the normal flow of business as being unnecessarily delayed, they may, by majority vote, waive or end public comment. Concerns brought forward during public comment may be addressed by the superintendent or appropriate staff members, usually within the week. So, did anyone get any, whatever the color card is?
Blue.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So, moving on to consent agenda, our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members in the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member.
Move the board approve consent agenda items 3.1 through 3.6.
Second.
Denise?
Nick?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and on to, I'm not scrolling as fast as you're talking. To reports from administration.
Yeah, this evening we will start with 4.1 Innovation and Learning Report and welcome both Dr. Westfall and Dr. Moore to the podium this evening.
We decided for Dr. Westfall's last 2 months, we were going to do this together. So, you want me to go? Yep. So I have the news. She has the...
Sorry.
Whoa. That was not me. Update on summer school. 2023 continues to move forward with student enrollment now at over 5,200, which is 97% of the predicted capacity for the program. So we'll have to be keeping a close eye on that. Summer school department has filled the majority of the teaching and support staff assignments and continuing to work with Kelly Services for the final 21 staff positions. The next thing is this past Saturday, if you had not heard about this already, we held our first annual LPS Special Olympics track meet at South Valley Middle School. The weather was great, the volunteers were amazing, and we thank our athletes for all their hard work and their amazing performances. They kept our fans very much in the love place, and they were dedicated to cheering for our athletes. A special shout out to Dr. Cook, Dr. Ferguson, and Jennifer Henderson for their work in helping organize that. And in addition, a huge thank you to those who supported the day, especially Kevin Colvin, Kelsey Stuff, Carolyn Modis, and then Coach Langer, who was the organizer. And last but not least, the ELD, or English Language Development Parent Night, is going to be tomorrow night. So it's going to be at Woodneath Library from 5:30 to 7. And it's just a chance for our families that are multilingual to sign up for the summer reading program, get a library card, get some multilingual text to read. And then also we'll have a little fun time there. We'll have a Kona ice truck on site. And then the Liberty North Eagle and the Liberty High Blue Jay will be, mascots will be in attendance to help with the children. So with that. Two other items that we wanted to highlight. Dr. Soluri and I have been working on giving badges to students. So we focused on seniors this last week before they left.
And I am excited to share that we awarded 1,122 badges. Now, some of those went to sophomores and juniors, but the majority of them went to seniors because we really wanted to get those to them before they left. But just to highlight, 611 badges for dual and college credit courses, 172 for Network 53, 130 for Educational Internship Program, EIP, 86 for NCAPS, 83 for Sealed by Literacy, 32 for Client-Connected Projects, 5 for the Build Your Own MBA, which students submit those on their own, and then 3 for the entrepreneurial experiences. We have more to come, but those are really exciting numbers that will just continue to grow over the next few years. The next component of this, after submitting or awarding the badges, is we'll get that into Power School. So as a reminder, for the class of 2025 and beyond, they have to have at least 1 or 2 market value assets upon graduation, and so we'll be marking those for students who get it in Power School, so they have that on their transcript. And then finally, as I've been sharing all year, our theme for buildings this year was creating our story, and so we really wanted the building principals to share their story with parents on social media. And we got together yesterday, and they had the opportunity. They've been creating books all year long, and so everybody shared their book yesterday. So we have 19 of these, and they turned out really, really well. So if you ever have some time, they are upstairs. We'll kind of put them on display so you can see. But they did a great job and really put some effort into that to highlight all the great things that are going on in the buildings. With that, we'll take any questions.
Just to mention, under fine arts, would you talk just a little more about this? I think it indicates 215 students that, if I'm understanding correctly, they're using their English, math, social studies, and science, somehow working it through various musical productions. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's
So-
part of their academy.
So share a little bit about that, would
Yeah.
you?
They've been, this is the 4th year, 5th year that they've done that, so it's kind of like a big PBL academy where they think of it like the micro school, where they bring in and do the components of all of the core courses and intermix those with some production. So, I mean, the numbers keep growing. We also have student interns that help us with that.
Okay.
They do everything from the production to the back, I mean, behind the scenes, casting.
Great.
Yeah, it's so good if you get a
And
chance to go to them.
That's an expansion of our arts integration efforts, which, if you'll recall, began with the Kennedy Center out of Washington, D.C. That work has continued and then just has kind of morphed into this next piece. So.
I know we started with less than 100 kids when we first started.
Well, the second paragraph in the fine arts is talking about Garrett Brown, who is, I think he's still at Epic, is he?
Works with Epic and Heritage. I know he's been working with this integration.
But he's going to be involved in a partnership with the Kennedy Center. Or some of his work is going to be presented, or he's going to be featured.
Yes.
And I'm careful about this, but I have to acknowledge that another teacher here, I can't think of his name, I think he's retired now, and I really encouraged him, recruited him out of the Kansas City School District.
Well, thank you for that.
And I'm really pleased about that. And I might as well just lavish other stuff on myself, I guess. That Wendy Smith actually worked for the Garrison Cultural Center before she came back to the school district as a full-time social worker. So I'm just claiming all of that.
You keep going, don't stop. We'll keep both them.
Hey, Dr. Westphal, just because you brought up capacity with summer school, I don't think there will be a time when we would get to that capacity, but is there a level where you would say, boy, we've got to turn people away?
Well, it's the staffing, right?
Yeah,
That's the piece
yeah.
that's really the constant balance. I don't think we stop, but when we don't have the teachers to fill, we have to do something.
Yep.
So it makes our class sizes very large, which makes the experience not as healthy, I suppose.
Sure.
So we're trying to keep that in check, but we feel like we're right there. I mean, like This
Yeah, I
is the
don't-
point where we're getting
yeah.
ready to start.
Right.
So-
I don't think we're going to exceed
We're 2 weeks
100%,
out.
but I was,
And
yeah.
keep in mind that a lot of those students are in virtual courses, especially at the high school level. So those numbers are high, and so what
Yep.
we can do when that happens is we can add another section. Again, it goes back to you have to have the staff to do that, but we can always add another section when there's virtual courses. And a lot of students at the high school level take PE, health, and personal finance to try to get those out of the way in the summer, and so those numbers
So they
are
can
always
focus
big.
on them in the summer? Is that what I'm getting?
I think that's what my son
So they can
said.
focus on them, yes. But they, we typically will have 8 to 10 sections of all of those courses because so many students want to take them.
Want to focus on them in the summer. Got it, yeah. Okay.
And with the, playing off that, the 21, I think you said 21 still
Vacancies.
openings or vacancies. So at this point, do we conclude that those are not going to be our own staff and that it is Kelly Services? That's kind of where the focus is at this point?
I don't, but, and Liberty's not alone in that. Other districts do rely on the substitute services to fill in the gaps.
It is not unusual, and it does cause us to, like, the leadership that we have then has to have this higher level of oversight because they are substitute teachers.
Right.
And so we watch them pretty closely. It ratchets up the rigor for everyone, but it's still a great experience because we really do have a good curriculum for the summer, so, yeah.
And then
That 21's on par, I think, with previous years, right, roughly?
And we usually get it filled, but
Yeah.
it's
Is that
just
what-
always down to the wire.
Less than last year? I feel like last year was.
Numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
We do get better numbers, but
No,
21
yeah.
is.
As far as the
oh, yeah.
subs.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
It is,
staffing.
yes.
So I feel like last year was
Yes.
particularly tough and tough year, and so.
Yeah, we had more subs and less kids, so
Yep.
like,
Yep.
they're helping us a lot, for sure. And Christopher's doing a great job trying to get that done. I mean, he's hard at it, so
Mhm.
he'll get it done.
Switching topics, in your report, you talked about MAP testing, and when your report was written, it was underway. Is it continuing, or is
We're
it
finishing
complete?
this-
It'll be
yeah.
finished this week.
They're doing the makeup exams right
Okay.
now for MAP, and then they're also finishing up iReady. So they had to finish MAP, they had to do the third iReady test, so they're doing that now. And then they're also doing Panorama for the third time.
It's part of our, we try not to let every test that goes unfulfilled is a mark against our percentage, so we do really work hard at not losing anybody. So, we do well.
Anything else for Dr. Westfall and Dr. Moore? I have one item for them, and Dr. Westfall would not say this, so I'll say it. Her book was published.
Yeah.
And so you may recall. Entitled Learner Agency, A Field Guide for Taking Flight, co-authored by Kara Vandis, Jeanette Westfall, as well as our very own Ashley Duvall. So I think this was copy number 1.
It was.
And we have other copies for the board that we'll be sure and get to you all. As a side note, you all were integral into approving this moving forward, and them being able to use the district throughout. So Liberty Public Schools is mentioned quite a bit, so I appreciate that. But I know there's a launch party in the works, and that's forthcoming later on this month, but congratulations on that, so.
Do not forget.
Signed copies.
We can probably arrange that.
It's our study session.
In the authorship, I don't know if you remember that we mentioned this and approved it, but in perpetuity of the sale of the book, Liberty will get 25% of the proceeds. We need that between all 4 of us, so.
That's great.
As a partnership in the work, because it's so much about
Congratulations.
Congrats. That's awesome.
4.2 then, we will welcome back to the podium Dr. Andrea Dixon-Sehorn for her equity report this evening.
All right, I am back, and Dr. Moore reminded me of something that she was speaking about the market value assets, and that is that every single one of our Grow Your Own recipients today, they were part of the EIP program. So I think that that is a remarkable testimony right there of the importance of this work. So I am here, and I'm just so excited about sharing this information today on behalf of the DLT Equity Work Group. And so that is the fact that we now have this data available for you to read through, and I'm certain you've taken your time reading through all of that, but the fact that we now have over the course of a year. Data, feedback from students telling us about their experiences around belonging. And so now we have this cross-section, if you will, of what secondary students said, what elementary students said, and then we were able to identify what I'm calling the big five. So when you think about how many students we sat down with, that's about 165 students between both elementary and secondary. We had, I believe, approximately 75 at the secondary level. And as you're reminded, we did go to every secondary building. And then at the elementary level, we went to every building as well. And we met with about 90 students in 5th grade. And so what I love about what has come out of this, or really what I'm referring to as the big five. And so the first thing that both elementary and secondary students conveyed to us is that they want to be a part of a school community that creates a welcoming and inclusive culture where all student groups can feel a sense of belonging. I think that's very powerful, coming from young people, talking to us about what it is they want in their school communities. Secondly, they shared with us that they need caring adults who are responsive to their needs, especially when they're having difficulties, and they're responding in a way that makes them feel safe. That, too, was very powerful feedback. Thirdly, students thrive on positive connections with both adults and their peers. Both are necessary for them to feel like they can thrive in school. And it's through all aspects of the school experience. So whether it's during classroom time, before school, after school, they consider that to be a part of their total school experience. Extracurricular activities, they're saying that those positive connections help them to thrive. And as you know, that's our theme for the LPS graduate profile. They also said that they crave collaborative, interactive peer learning experiences in the classroom setting. So they're saying we don't want any kind of sit and get. We want to be able to interact and learn together. And then lastly, students would like to get to know their peers above and beyond the academic content within the classroom setting through team building activities that foster positive social interactions. And so our next steps moving forward, as a matter of fact, Dr. Moore and I were just talking about it earlier today, will be to share this information with our school leaders. Each level, elementary and secondary, they'll get the total report again. Elementary obviously hasn't seen it, but secondary has. So they'll get the total report, and then also they'll get their individual reports for their buildings. And in that way, we can have deeper conversations over the summer about how to take some of what we've learned from students based on their experiences or their ideas about what school could look like around belonging, and then fold some goals into their next iteration of their building improvement plans for next school year. So that is where we are with that, and I just was so excited that this is really the emphasis of my report this evening. And so I'll take any questions or comments at this time, if you have any.
I was glad to see this too. Now, it might sound, let me read this to you. Students don't always show respect when their differences present and need adult assistance when having more positive interactions with their peers. I thought it was a very powerful statement. It tells us that the adults in the room have to engage in that, because otherwise it's a pattern of behavior that has to be affected. And I think it's a very powerful statement. Some people could interpret it as negative, but it tells me it means there has to be an offense. That's what it means to me. And I mean, I'm still absorbing a lot of this, but this is some good stuff here that used right can make a real difference in our school world.
Absolutely. In other words, how can we make those situations where students are having difficulty with differences of any kind, right, and make those teachable moments? That's really what they're saying in so many words. How can we, when we make mistakes, learn from them in a way where we can continue to build positive relationships with our peers?
Absolutely.
Dr. Dixon-Seahorn, I know that all of the buildings had a belonging goal for this year. As you're having these conversations and sharing this information with the building leaders, is it conceivable that some of them decide, I want to keep working on the one that I have, Or is it more likely that you're going to suggest that they have a different goal to focus on in terms of belonging for this next year? Or could there be a mix?
I'm glad you asked that question because Dr. Moore and I, again, were just talking about this today, just kind of ideating what next year could look like. And so we're hopeful that when they see particularly elementary and then also the combined data, that maybe they'll take the opportunity to either stick with what they have and continue to evolve that goal or create a new goal altogether. So it could possibly be a combination.
One of the things I would say from some of the anecdotal information is, which as a non-math person who appreciates stories over data sometimes. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a history major.
University of Chicago.
It helps her, which is why we sit together so we can read each other out.
Positive social interactions.
Yeah, I just would say, I mean, my first takeaway is we're doing good things. And my second takeaway is there's still more to be done. And so I don't want to overgeneralize it, but I look at some of the discussions on students' interactions with teachers and how important those relationships are and how much our staff is doing. And so it was helpful for me to see some of that anecdotal information to kind of put a picture on it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
I feel like we've heard and seen now a couple years in a row from some of the work that you all have been able to do about looping, which I assume, I hope I'm using the term correctly, keeping the same educator as the students progress in their through their schools. I don't know. I know there's probably positive and less than positive things that go along with looping. I think I'd just like to know a little bit, not right now, but like to know a little bit more about it and the benefits of it. I don't know if it's right for a study session in the future or not, but that theme continues to come forward. And even though the elementary school kids did not directly say, hey, I want teacher's going to loop with me, there's feedback within that I'm intuiting is, boy, it would be helpful to lean into that, to have that looping process for elementary school teachers. So.
And we can certainly add that as far as a future study session. Side note, Miss Angela Benner, who was recognized earlier this evening at Lewis and Clark, did that for a couple years.
Okay.
Where kiddos rotated 4th grade into 5th grade. So we have some of that going on across the district, as you know, but we can bring what the research tells us as far as best practice.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
Anything else for Dr. Dixon Seahorn before we let her slip away?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to hear from Miss Cindy Sullivan a couple times this evening, but we will welcome her to the podium for her finance report.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Everybody needs to focus on personal finance.
That's right.
I like numbers now.
I'm giving my son to you.
She said that because
No, I know, I'm sorry.
Should be everybody's focus. Good evening. It's good to see you all. We've been busy this month. A lot going on, as you know. A couple things I want to highlight. We've been working with PFM MOCAT to generate an investment plan for our bond funds that we will be getting next week and upon closing. We also received our Standard & Poor's rating back, and we have guests from Stifel with us tonight, and I think they will address that a little bit. But we did retain the AA stable rating, so we were very happy with that. That's always a fun call to make, and the follow-up, there's a lot of follow-up that happened this time, but that was very pleased to get that. We did have an Audit and Finance Committee meeting last night. We had a great meeting. We had a guest, Dr. Dixon Seahorn, attended with us and sat in and listened in, so we were glad to have her. We had some good conversation over how this year's budget is going to wrap up, particularly in light of the budget amendment that you saw come through. There was a pretty sizable budget amendment for this late in the year, and it was geared toward the SPED placement, R2, Resident 2 placement, and after seeing what has happened with that number of students, they fell short on their initial budget of tuition costs. And just to highlight that, we had 13 students that came back to us that were Resident 2s this year. During the year, we identified 5 new students that we paid tuition for. And then during the year, we had 6 students move in. So we had a total of 24 students that we were sending to outside facilities in the district that we paid tuition on. So they were concerned that our costs were out of line, but when you consider these numbers, you know, that budget amendment was very warranted, and it doesn't lead to any mismanagement of their budget. It just is facts and circumstances about how those students came to us and how we need to provide the education that is best for them. So they were very interested in that, and so we spent quite a bit of time talking about that. And we also spent a bit of time, of course, talking about next year's budget. So it was a great meeting. We do have one incumbent that is, her term is ending. We have the applications open, and they have been posted in Quick News, and we have 3 applications. So we will be setting up interviews with those people to come meet with you at the June board meeting. We had today our preliminary meeting with our benefits broker, Holmes Murphy, so we're already working on that for next year, which is for calendar year 24 benefits. So that process has started. I think, one other thing, property tax revenue, I always tell you about that. We had a great collection day yesterday, so we are sitting at 99.85% of our budgeted amount. So we budget based on historical collection data, so if you put that in terms of the whole amount we could collect, it's actually 97.6, so that's still fantastic. So we have one more day in June that we will collect, so I would imagine we'll go over budgeted revenue predictions. Probably won't make it to the full tot of money, but good stuff there, so it's been a good year that way. So that's what I have for you right now, unless you have any other questions for me.
And that remaining percentage then is comprised of both delinquent taxes as well as contested taxes?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Well, thanks to you and your team for all the work this time of year. So,
thank you.
Busy time of year.
Yep, we've got a great team. Thank you.
Does SPED anticipate those out-of-district placements to continue?
Well, 3 will graduate now that you ask, and several will have moved out. They're predicting that 16 of them will return next year.
Wow. I appreciate the multi-step equation you gave us at the beginning of this. I have no idea how many we had.
Yeah.
Couldn't keep up.
24.
Yes. How is that historically for us?
We have, for the last 3 years, hovered right around the 20 to 21 number of resident 2 placements.
So we're not out of sync?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a little bit. 4.4, Operations Report. We will welcome Mr. Stephen Anderson to the podium.
Good evening. Just a couple items I wanted to highlight from the report, and then I'll hit on some bond planning updates for you all. The first is just recognize Mr. Mark Kolasek. If you looked at the report, the Carrot Man is worth a read if you get a chance. But he had kind of put this program together and encouraging all the kids to eat their vegetables and was rewarding them if they did just that. And to my understanding, they actually ran out of carrots. I think that's the first time in the history of Liberty Public Schools that that's occurred. So just wanted to recognize him and all the good work that he does. It also was mentioned in the report that School Nurses Day week was last week. Kathy Elmer and Chris Redmond kind of made the rounds of all 18 sites, and there are about 40 staff, and just wanted to recognize them and all the good work that they do. And, you know, one of the things, and we had an email come through today, we had an incident, and we have incidents occur from time to time, and just her team and how they kind of sweep in and do the necessary work to take care of that staff member or student, but then to kind of follow them through the course of the day. So appreciate all the good work that they do. And then with respect to the bond work, we have, if you've seen out here where the Liberty High tennis courts are going to go in place, that site is nearly cleared. It should be cleared here later this week, and then they'll begin the site work later in this month and into early June, and then kind of getting into the work all through the course of the summer into early fall. And then also we have several teams that are currently meeting just about every week. There's a baseball, softball team that's put together. There's a team for South Valley and Discovery for those additions. There's a team for Epic, and then there's a team for some of the support side work that we're doing with both the new distribution center and then the tech center. So All that work continues or kind of in the schematic phase. As soon as we have some conceptual plans, we'll be sharing those with you across over the course of the next couple months. And certainly we'll update you probably at a study session kind of later into the summer as how that work is coming together. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Besides the tennis courts, is there anything else that would be hitting this summer of trying to get completed this summer that would fit as far as something that we had listed on the list of bond activity?
No, and really the primary reason for that is we didn't want to invest in the engineering
Right.
and architecture work
Right.
beforehand, so. Yeah. We'll see a lot of activity summer and into the fall, like we'll be pretty busy
Right.
kind of then moving through the school year.
Anything else from Mr. Anderson?
This is something, I don't expect you to know this offhand, but I would appreciate hearing maybe in a Friday update or something about Kid Zone. I noticed that the discontinuation of the multi-student, like multiple student discount in the Kid Zone program. I just was curious about how many families would be affected by that. And again, I wouldn't expect you to know that offhand, but I would just be interested in
So the
seeing that.
sibling discount, in fact, I just asked Ms. Brown this today, I think, we had a meeting since we've announced that we removed that. We kept rates steady, so we've not raised rates. She has not heard anything in that regard. And then remember, we also instituted a 30% discount for families on the free and reduced, within the free and reduced program. So it just kind of offset that a little bit. She has not heard anything to date, but I can certainly let you know how many families it affected.
Thank you.
Free and reduced discount stays though, right?
Yes,
Correct.
yes. Which is good. I was just curious.
Okay.
I don't know that it surprises me, but just seeing it in a chart, that it's just participation in lunch and or breakfast is just steady.
It is steady.
Like they don't want, nobody comes here, you're either in or you're out. You commit for the year. It's just wild.
Very true. They're a loyal bunch.
They really are.
Thanks, Mr. Anderson. Next up then is item 4.5, and that is our Human Resources Report. Dr. Delcem.
Good evening, everyone. I see that one of our board members really paid attention to my message last week of being a recruiter, that everyone is a recruiter. So thank you, Board Member Byrd. Gold star on recruitment. And I will say the HR report, the thunder is stolen by Dr. Dixon Stehorn and Mr. Rosecrans, which I'm really glad of. The Grow Your Own program is fantastic, and be sure you are calendaring for June 1st, which was in your board update, for that meet and greet with all the students coming back. That will be really exciting. With the wellness update you saw in your report highlighted, we had 56 employees complete the April challenge, and I really got to pay attention to what this was called, from distress to de-stress. It was a 20-day challenge, and it involved physical, mental, and emotional health to de-stress. Also, our wellness coordinator is developing an 8-week weight loss pilot program, and she's working with a few departments on that, rolling it out. If it's successful, she'll open it up district-wide. And the difference with this weight loss program is it combines, obviously, the nutrition and physical side, but with the emotional side to it. So that's our wellness update right now. Tied with that, our health insurance premium differential that I mentioned last time, the $600, employees have until September 1st to get their 2 components in, which is the health risk assessment and then their wellness exam. Our wellness coordinator will send out tailored updates to those employees. And right now, to date, as of April 27th, we've had 638 employees complete both components of that. So we're moving right along there. Back to everyone's a recruiter with our resignations. On the certified side, we've had 79 resignations, but have filled 68 of those at this time. And with our classified staff, we have filled 397
positions to date. This month, we had 2 hiring events which were new for us but very successful. So through Grand Canyon University, Maple Woods Community College hosted that, and we hired 6 staff members in combination with Kids Zone and our paint crew through that event. So just leaving again, everyone's a recruiter for Liberty Public Schools. No.
Questions of Dr. Delcem?
Are we struggling to hire for some of those summer tip jobs?
Well, I'll lean on Steve for that too. I would say overall, those are transitional positions, and so filling those can be.
Yeah.
I think I just was talking to Mr. Aldridge. I think he's been pleased thus far.
Okay, good.
I think it's been a pretty good year so far.
I think historically it's been pretty, I don't know, easy to fill, but not as tough
with
one.
some of the grounds and grounds positions.
Yep.
But and then paint kind of comes and goes.
Yep. Okay.
Manual labor, no one wants to do it.
And then just on the wellness challenge, I know 56 completed it. Roughly when we do these wellness challenges, do you know, is there a greater initial participation and then people just drop off, or?
I can connect with Rebecca on it,
sure.
but I think it certainly probably depends on the interest per
Yeah,
employee.
yeah, for sure.
We see you for 1 more month, is that right? Dr.
That's
Tucker
right.
and I were just
We were talking about that this afternoon, so,
Yeah, June 30.
Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. Thank you, Dr. Delcem.
Thank you.
Last item then, under administration reports, a couple of additions to the superintendent's report. As you know, the end of the year is incredibly busy. We had a great weekend, so thank you to each of you for your participation in Liberty High School and Liberty North High School commencement ceremonies. And a tremendous thanks to the administration at both LHS and LNHS for everything that goes into putting on those events on Sunday. So a great celebration all around on Mother's Day on top of that. So, and again, as Dallas mentioned, tomorrow recognizing our retirees, another end-of-year event in terms of appreciating them for their years of service. So we look forward to celebrating that. I've included in my report the last few months some work happening in and around the graduate profile and transitioning that to more of a rubric for our pre-K through grades 12 and what that looks like both for our students as well as our teachers. That is taking shape with the intent being to bring it in front of a group of teachers for feedback to be able to kind of refine so that we're ready to roll pieces of that out in the fall. So we'll certainly bring that to the board in terms of your viewing as well. Strategic planning, as I mentioned, concluding year 4 of our strategic plan, our current strategic plan, albeit we refine it every year. And then next year being really a heavier emphasis on soliciting additional community feedback as we did 4 years ago. So we look forward to that and are having some planning conversations with G&D consultants and thinking about the 23-24 school year. We'll speak a little bit later on about the Success Ready Students Network and kind of the update around that. Vision 2020 met last week and had a good turnout as far as that meeting and agenda. Those conversations included Success Ready Students Network as well as soliciting feedback on our engagement plan. Jackson Zimmer was there, so thank you to Jackson for being one of our student representatives and really providing tremendous. It was great that everybody was there, but it was really good that Jackson and his peers were there, quite honestly, and that they participated and gave us some great feedback. And as you all know, it's also the end of the legislative session. That wrapped up last week. And so we're still sifting through kind of the impact, what passed, what didn't get through. Sometimes that's both sides are beneficial, but we'll certainly provide additional updates as some of those items come about in terms of updates from different associations and different groups. So with that, would certainly open it up for any questions you may have of me this evening.
Thank you to Mr. Ackerman for such a wonderful opening paragraph to your report. Always my favorite thing to read. Get a little sense of your writing style.
And as we were working on that program evaluation, as we used to call it, right, that dovetails well with the work that's going on with our engagement plan. And so whether it's the number of YouTube clips or Google, our website, or Let's Talk or Quick News, the ability for us to look at those analytics and be able to say, okay, this is who we're reaching, this is the feedback we're receiving that falls into those categories within our engagement plan around informing, consulting, involving, and collaborating with our families and communities. So I think that's pretty informative as to what that plan looks like moving ahead, so.
Dallas,
Yes.
I've heard so much good feedback about, in particular, about the email push update that goes out after these meetings. So I think that's been a great addition to our communication strategy. So I know that you mentioned that.
So not to give Mr. Ackerman a big head, but also thanks to Ms. Brown for coming on
Yes.
board and helping out with everything. I think her addition has allowed you to expand the breadth of all you do, and I know she does a great job, so thanks to her as well.
And she is everywhere. You can't hardly go anywhere that you're not running into Caitlin Brown.
Or Mr. Ackerman.
Well, that's true, but he wears quieter clothes.
Anything else?
I like the way that was put, quietly.
All right, then that concludes our administration reports this
You're
evening.
clearly getting to the end of the school year, aren't you?
On to unfinished business in the compensation plan.
So under Section 5, we do have a couple of items for you that then bring us to consideration or action. So 5.1 is our 23-24 compensation plan. And again, we want to thank our community for their support during our election and engaging along the way as far as listening to presentations and really digesting information that then situates us to be able to do a fairly robust compensation recommendation this evening. So you have several items that are uploaded. Thank you to Team Liberty and Cindy and her team and the HR department, Dr. Delsem, and helping navigate those conversations over the course of the spring. Just again, to kind of reiterate what we're talking about or able to do as it relates specifically to the salary recommendation. Recommendation includes vertical and horizontal movement to the tune of $1,699,597, enhancement of certificated salary schedules at approximately 8%, and adjusting the base on the teacher level to $43,200 as a starting pay for a beginning teacher with a bachelor's degree. That total cost is $4,623,976. Our ability to implement the classified salary schedule recommended by Evergreen. You'll recall in past years with those compensation studies, we've tiered that integration or that implementation. With the passage of the debt service levy transfer, we're able to do more upfront, so $2,408,118. In addition, similarly with the Evergreen study, application to the professional 10 and 12-month salary schedules, $292,438 is the anticipated cost associated with that. Enhancement to the tune of 5% on our extra duty salary schedules for a total expenditure of $115,540. And then on the administrator salary schedule, increase at about 7% to the cost of $667,269. And then the total estimated cost, including, or that does not include the cost of PSRS and peers contributions, $9,806,938 total. You have a deeper explanation of those recommendations that follow on page 2. But again, that's kind of the overview or the recap. What follows then are revised schedules. So for our administrators, certificated, classified, extra duty, and miscellaneous rates of pay. You'll also notice strike-throughs in terms of what we had previously and what we're moving toward as far as recommendations this evening. Ms. Sullivan or Dr. Delsem, anything to add that I've missed? Okay. We'll just present that to you this evening then for your consideration.
Ms. Sullivan, this keeps us within our fund balance percent that we're targeting? Okay.
And we can continue it?
We can sustain it?
Yes. Thank you, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion?
I move the board adopt the 2023-2024 salary recommendations and compensation plans as presented.
Second.
Nick?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
On to 5.2 then, entitled Series 2023 General Obligation Bonds Market Resolution. Last month, we had Joe Kender and Ben Thompson, Joe from Stiefel and then Ben from Gilmore and Bell, come and share an ask, really, prior to going to market and prior to our Standard & Poor's call, in terms of kind of setting the stage for what that could look like. So we want to welcome them back, not Joe and Ben, but Joe and guest. So we'll have them come to the podium and introduce themselves and then be able to share the results of since we last met.
Yes, thanks. It's good to see you all again. I brought a member of our team, Mackenzie Techlaw, with me. Sorry, at Stiefel, and I did just want to take a second. I know, Karen, Ms. Rogers, you've already mentioned the hard work that Ms. Sullivan has gone through at this point, and it's not going to surprise you to hear this, but I was telling her that I'm going to brag a bit on the staff, the team that you've put in place, your administrative team, because as the market was moving around, and you'll see a slide here in a minute to show you what I'm talking about, we came with a plan that put a lot of pressure on you all to make decisions quickly, but also put a lot of pressure and stress on your admin team to get things ready and be responsive. And not only did they rise to that challenge, they worked hard, got everything done for you all, and put you in a nice spot to be able to get things done when they could have easily just said, you know, we've got a lot going on, let's move at a normal pace here. They didn't do it, and she kind of ho-hummed it like, hey, that's just what we do. So you've got a great group, and Dr. Tucker did a great job as well, and so did Mr. Anderson. So we worked closely with all of your team. They did a tremendous job, and I think this is my 11th of 12 board meetings over the last 3 weeks, so I've been to a few. So we're working hard, too, don't get me wrong, and Mackenzie's a really hard-working, great part of our team, so I'm glad she's here. You'll get to see more and more of her, hopefully, over the years. But we did have a great result last week, and we hit the market at a very good time. We don't, of course, know what the future holds, but we had a good result. Can we get the, thank you, madam. So we had a good result here, and so I'm just going to run through the numbers really quickly. Please ask any questions you may have. This first page is sources and uses, so it's where the money's coming from, where the money's going. We've got three purposes there, those two leases, the Series 2014 and Series 2015. In the middle are the repurchase of those leases or the shift of those leases from operational funds being used to pay those back to debt service funds being used to pay those back. In reality, folks, that's just going to be cash from your debt service fund. All of that will be paid off as of March 1st of this year. So not only are you going to save some cash flow in terms of $2.5 million or so a year annually in your operation fund freed up for you to use, but also you're going to save over $5 million of taxpayer funds by doing this refinancing and repurchasing. So you're actually going to lower the interest burden of the district versus what you were paying, and in fact, better than any refinancing we could have done. So not to go way back in time, but back in 2017, as we were getting some tax law change, we worked hard with this board even over Christmas and the administration. I think you held a special meeting in between Christmas and New Year's and decided not to do a refinancing of the 14 and 15. It certainly has paid off because I think you saved twice as much as you would have saved if you would have done that lease back then. So lots of decisions have gone on, but lots of good ones. The column on the far left, the new money, that simply means the money that is going to be allocated towards spending on projects. I'll point you down there under the uses of funds on that new money column. A little over $105 million will go into your account for construction purposes. The good news is rates have come up, even in the last week since we did this. And so we want to kind of root for rates to continue to go up so you can take advantage of the low rates on the borrowing side of things. And then next week when you get your money in your hands, hopefully you can earn some more interest on that and be able to do some additional projects as well. A couple lines down from that is our fee. That's $4 per $1,000 of bonds issued. So every $1,000 you issued, we charge you $4. Again, most of that goes towards our team of 300-plus institutional bond salesmen who have access to over 300,000 investor accounts. And their job on the day of sale is to make sure that we auction off those securities to those willing to pay the highest price. So we break up, believe it or not, $120 million into $5,000 increments and sell those off to the people willing to pay the highest price. Not on your deal in particular, we had a great result, but today in Springfield we had that very thing happen where you say, well, how often on a $120 million deal does a $5,000 order come in? Well, it does come in, so we actually have a maturity that ends in a 5, which doesn't happen very often, but we have a maturity on a $190 million deal that's $1,605,000 or something like that, because someone was willing to pay the highest price, and so we moved some stuff around. So we really do focus on getting the lowest yields for you all. Other costs are included in there. The other one that I would point to is the state auditor fee, a couple up from the bottom. I know you all have heard me say this before, but partner of mine who you worked with for many years, Greg Bricker, passed away here in 2016 very suddenly. And part of his legacy, of course, is that you're stuck now watching me. He trained me, he helped me, he was a good mentor to me. But in prior to 2009, that fee for you all would have been $120,000. It was $1 essentially per $10,000 issued, 100 or 1,000. I'm messing it up. Anyway, it would have been $120,000. You divide it by your issue amount by 1,000. Greg got that capped at $1,000. That amounts to about 2 hours worth of work by the state auditor. So it is not a lot of work, and bond issues were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Greg got that passed in 2009. He got that passed with an emergency clause. So this summer of 23 will be the 15th summer that has benefited students across the state of Missouri by putting more money back into the pockets of school districts to do better things for kids. So it's part of his legacy. He did it to help kids. He didn't do it to help just his clients. It, of course, helps anybody that works and does work in the bond space. So every district across the state, all 518 of you all, are benefiting from that. And, of course, you really get $119,000 of additional money going toward construction projects. So that's a credit to Greg and the work he did. We used to call it the George K. Baum bill back when we were with George K. Baum. Now we call it the Greg Bricker bill. If you wouldn't mind scrolling down to that next page, Denise, that would be great. Thank you, madam. So this is just a rate summary table. If you remember, we talked kind of about that barbell structure. So that maturity value in the middle there, you can see you're paying almost $27 million alone on this 2023 issue next March. Again, the vast majority of that is going to go toward paying off those leases so that you have essentially pay those off with cash sitting in your debt service fund. You have built up quite a balance there simply because you've grown faster than what we projected. That's typically how we like it to work. So as your AV has exceeded what we've projected, you have collected some additional revenues. We do still feel that you will have a nice sound reserve sitting there, but of course you don't want to become a bank, just like your reserve target in operations. We want to make sure we're putting that money to work because all we can do with that is pay bricks and mortar debt. So we want to make sure we're minimizing those interest costs for you all. And then slotting some money in there, again, feeling very comfortable and confident that you will be able to go out to a no tax increase bond issue the next time you decide to do those projects, should you need them. On the bottom, very bottom right there is a number you'll care about. That's true interest cost, 3.83%. That's our fee and then your actual bonds, all considered if you did not prepay or refinance those at any time in the future. We call it yield to worst. For some reason, the 100-year-old nomenclature is true interest cost. A couple pages down, you'll see that your bond yield was at 3.57%. You don't need to go down there. But if you were to refinance or repay in the future, you'll get closer to that 3.57%. The bond yield is just looking strictly at your yields and not at how those might pay out over time. Just to put that in perspective for you, even though rates have come back up a little bit, on the day that I started on October 1st, 2007, the one-year AAA grade, so a couple rating levels above you, which really is only achieved by huge issuers, state of Missouri, I don't even think the federal government has regained their AAA status. But that, you could borrow out money 1 year at 3.56% the day I started if you were a AAA. You potentially will borrow money out 20 years, 120 million of it at 3.57%. So from a historical perspective, very, very low interest rates. If you don't mind hitting that next page, Denise. And I mean, we can't make this up. If I knew this was going to happen, I wouldn't be here in front of you. I'd be sailing on a yacht somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. These are the 10-year and 30-year Treasury curves. So I'm going to walk over here real quick. So this is like long-term rates. This is kind of medium-term rates. And the dates on this is May 4th. And what did we go to, Mackenzie?
May
today,
18th.
May 18th.
Yeah.
This, believe it or not, is May 11th. That is the day that you priced your bonds into the market. So we picked the lowest over outside of the 4th, which we couldn't actually price on that day because we didn't have our 30 days from the
day of the election elapsed. But that is something that, particularly on the right side, right of the May 11th, that is why we rushed. And again, we don't like to rush. We like to move in geologic timescales, and we know that our plans of finance are resilient against changes in the market. But when we see that opportunity to go get stuff like this, we want to make sure we do that for you all. So I think that this will pay off. No matter what, you have accomplished your goals, your financial goals. They are better than what we set out to do. And hopefully that we rush this to the market and we're able to access that capital for you at lower costs. I think there's certainly a big portion of the economics community that thinks rates will continue to go up, at least in the near term.
So when you say rush, we rushed with preparation. We didn't.
We rushed the very last part of this that's going on, a planning phase that's going on for 3 years, and I put a truncated timeline in front of you as an option.
Yep.
And so it wasn't a rush job. You're right. You are correct, sir. This was a long, well-thought-out plan, and it was the execution of that plan that we pushed the timeline a bit to try to take advantage of that. So the rest of the documents are all supporting documents, just source material, things that you can see, tracking the actual savings in each one of those leases, showing you what we're actually refinancing, and then there's, I think, a detailed cost of issuance page at the end. But the fact of the matter is, it's a tremendous deal. I do want to mention, I forgot at the beginning, we had a great amount of interest in your bonds, which is another thing that we were hoping for. If you remember, there hasn't been a lot of paper out in Missouri, and I think we had almost 2 times the number of orders in terms of the quantity of orders coming in than we had actually bonds issued. And we were able to actually lower the rates then on the day of until people fell off, and we were able to get the lowest possible rates for you. So that high demand piece, that low amount of supply in Missouri certainly helped you out as well. So I think there's some real benefits to going out and doing that, and now you get that money and get to earn some interest while you do projects. So great deal. Congratulations again. I can't say enough about your admin team and the work that you all did to prep for this and get ready over the long term, but then also to put the real work in here and speed up that last little bit. So congratulations, and be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions of Joe or Mackenzie this evening? No action, just the follow-up, wrap back from our April conversation, so.
That's great.
All right. Thank you both very much. Appreciate all your help.
Appreciate you. Good to see you.
Next item under unfinished business then is 5.3, and that is just a follow-up. We've been working on, for the last year and a half, really, Success Ready Students Network. And so you have several things that are uploaded to Diligent for you this evening. And I know Denise is going to get a very brief slide deck that hits on some of the highlights. So you'll recall earlier this spring we shared with you the resolution for consideration in moving forward with a demonstration project, also known as an innovation waiver that is permitted under statute. But what I thought we would start with before we look at the resolution is really kind of a historical timeline or view of when a lot of this work really began. And so going back to, I think, the 2012-2013 school year, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education pulled together and actually commissioned a proficiency-based task force. Do you have that slide deck, Denise?
I apologize. I'm not able to pull it up because it is locked.
Okay, got you. Not sure why that's locked. Need to make sure I have my talking points here. So back in 2012 and 2013, the Department of Ed commissioned a proficiency-based task force. Beyond that, in 2015 and 16, Missouri Association of School Administrators pulled together an accreditation and assessment task force that worked closely with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Several of you will remember in and around 2017, Liberty Public Schools joined the Missouri Assessment Partnership, which was really an effort at that point to communicate to the state, both the Department of Ed as well as just constituents, that there are better ways of tackling assessment. Something you heard this evening that Dr. Moore shared was kids coming off of taking both the iReady test, but then also the MAP test. And so one of the things we talk about in the assessment space is our ability to leverage interim assessments or common formative assessments through your assessments like iReady, because they're predictable, they're valid, and they're reliable. So where a student ends up performing on their third iReady assessment, has a high correlation to how that student will fare, whether they're below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced when it comes to the MAP test. And as you heard earlier, kids are wrapping up their MAP testing, and then they're taking their iReady test. And so the crux of the MOAP study and the board's participation and our district's participation in was really to basically confirm and do some statistical analysis as to these common formative assessments, their validity, their reliability, and their predictability, in conjunction with our MAP or end-of-course exams. End-of-course exams at the high school level are slightly different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. In 2019, the DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the commissioner put together an Education Policy Advisory Committee. We participated in that as well, facilitated by the Hunt Institute, involving a variety of educators, legislators, and business partners that brought recommendations forward to inform DESE's strategic plan. Among those recommendations was personalization as far as personalized learning, real-world learning expansion, and the like. In 2020, 21, we ended up with the Bellwether study. That was a companion piece to the work that occurred with the Education Policy Advisory Committee. It really focused on personalized learning with an emphasis on competency-based learning and what that might look like for our state. And so then looking to the State Board of Education in the fall of 2021, the State Board of Education commissioned the Success Ready Students Work Group that called for a diverse group of stakeholders to come together to study personalized learning or competency-based learning to bring recommendations for the state board to consider. And so that spring, 2022, last spring, there were about 3-4 facilitators, myself included, that facilitated the Success Ready Students Work Group, pulled over 100 stakeholders together. We had student and staff and parents and business members represented. We had 2 individuals from Liberty Public Schools, a student as well as a staff person, myself as facilitator, that participated in that work. It culminated in June of 2022 with a presentation to the State Board of Education. And those recommendations from the work group included the idea of launching innovation zones, of which now there are 3 zones in the state of Missouri. There's a system design zone, there's an innovative learning design zone, and then there is kind of a collaborative network zone. The system design zone are those districts that are already doing much of this work at a systems level. The innovative learning design zone are those districts that may have some of this work occurring in pockets, whether it's classrooms, whether it's that's the school level, but not quite at a district level. In addition to launching those innovation zones, a recommendation was to redesign our assessment system. Again, building on the previous work that had transpired from MOAP, the Proficiency-Based Task Force, the MASA Accreditation and Assessment Task Force as well. The third recommendation was to redesign accreditation systems. Knowing that there are other states that are already doing this, we can learn from other states, other systems, in an effort to truly personalize learning and make it more meaningful, given that we know there are better ways to assess students. Fourthly, expanding business to education partnerships. A lot of that was predicated on the work that we're doing in the Kansas City area with real-world learning. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Ensuring that we're engaging stakeholders and communicating these efforts. And then lastly, the 6th recommendation was to develop policy to be able to inform and move competency-based or personalized learning forward. We've had several of our legislators in the area assist with those efforts and get some of that through the legislative session over the last couple of years. Additionally, the governor pulled together a competency-based task force that has a variety of individuals that are serving in that capacity. Side note, I was appointed to that task force last year. We have yet to meet, but we're working on trying to schedule that to be able to share best practices with the state as it relates to personalized learning and competency-based learning. That's the backdrop in terms of those recommendations that then led to the creation of the Success Ready Students Network in partnership with DESE and the Kauffman Foundation through some funding through the Kauffman Foundation. The focus is really around 4 areas: reimagining and redesigning assessment, to be able to create a new assessment and accountability system to support student agency, to be high school, college, career, and workplace ready. In addition, to empower educators and communities to innovate, to engage with business partners to expand real-world learning, and to design and implement policy changes that are necessary, whether it's at the board level or at the legislative level. The other shift is in regard to kind of a prior system to a new system. So shifting tools historically that were designed to provide feedback at a systems level, like the Missouri Assessment Plan, and measure system performance using lagging indicators like MSIP. So a lot of kind of in arrears or after the fact indicators, and shifting to the right tools or the right lead indicators. So providing continuous feedback to students, teachers, and parents on individual learner growth to high school, college, career, and workplace readiness. And then lastly, support systems, design thinking using those leading indicators to inform strategic planning and continuous improvement. An important piece to connect through is that your curriculum and your standards, in essence, remain the same in terms of the standards that we're used to assessing and integrating into the classroom. How we do that and how we assess it is typically what we're talking about changing within those recommendations shared with the state board. We are following a definition for Missouri of competency-based learning, and there are 8 points to that definition. It's first of all, students are empowered daily. Assessment is meaningful. Students receive timely, differentiated support. Students progress based on evidence of their mastery, not seat time. And so it's actually more rigorous in this type of approach. Students learn actively using different pathways and varied pacing in terms of the personalization piece. Strategies to ensure equity for all students are embedded. Rigorous common expectations for learning, and students engage in real-world learning experiences. You'll notice that last piece was an additional part to the definition, specifically drawn out from the experiences that we're working to pull forward here in the Kansas City area. As you'll recall, during this period of the last several years, we've transitioned from MSIP 5 to MSIP 6. Liberty Public Schools participated in the pilot of MSIP 6, as you may recall, specifically as it relates to climate and culture surveys, response to standards, and then lastly, continuous improvement, in which we shared all of the work that we have going on. Coincidentally, we received full points on our last MSIP review in terms of our APR that was released in this pilot year 1. Looking ahead, those districts that participate in the innovation waiver, if the State Board of Education approves the waiver, we end up with a new reporting process. You'll have some characteristics or indicators of MSIP 6 that we value that will carry forward, but you will have a change as it relates to assessment specifically. And so classification will include a level of accreditation. Those districts that participate will likely be identified as a state innovation waiver district. In terms of metrics or how we develop dashboards focused on these 5 key areas: college, career, and workplace readiness, high school readiness, keeping in mind that 3rd through 8th grade map specifically is intended for students to be ready for high school content or high school coursework. So really talking about high school readiness, but it's really that pre-K-12 continuum or journey. In addition to that, attendance as learning engagement. So rather than just seat time, attendance connected to engagement and personalization. Coming out of COVID, where it was advised for our families and students and staff to, hey, if you're feeling symptomatic, stay home. We're starting to kind of get out of that and trying to tackle that as far as attendance concerns, but at the same time really focusing on attendance and the importance of engaging and learning. Graduate follow-up and seeing where our graduates fall post-high school. But then there are also those federal accountability requirements that we can't necessarily get away from unless the state pursues an innovation waiver from some of those federal accountability pieces. So what would be included in a report would include college career workforce readiness as far as market value assets, end of course exams continuing, but then really focusing on growth to readiness, growth within years, and growth across years, as far as multiple ways of looking at how students are performing as it relates to through-year assessment, and leveraging platforms like iReady or NWEA in what districts are utilizing as it relates to their through-year assessments. There's about a 100-page document that we've been working on to submit to the State Board of Education as the demonstration project. Much of it is thought out, but at the same time, in the event that the State Board of Education gives those districts the green light, it will be a little bit of building it as you're flying it. with DESE and the state board and those partner districts collaborating one with another. Last thing that I would share, and then certainly open it up for any discussion or questions you might have, is that we've been working to create really transparent view of the work of the Success Ready Students Network, in part through their Success Ready Students Network webpage, of which their meetings are archived, their presentations, their professional learning experiences have been archived. So for those that have been following along, they've been able to benefit from seeing that content there. If you're new to the conversation, would encourage you all to take a look at the Success Ready Students Network. The last piece then would be a grant opportunity that has been brought forward again through the legislature and through DESE. There's an allocation of funding that is set aside for districts and organizations to pursue in and around personalized learning or competency-based learning. And so as a companion piece, in the event this were to pass at the state level, there's a professional learning grant that has been drafted. It's in draft form currently. Districts have seen it. They've had a committee working on the professional learning side of that. I know Dr. Westfall has been involved in that. And to be frank, a lot of the work that we do in Liberty Public Schools has found its way into the demonstration project, as well as the professional learning menu for next year for those districts that are participating. And so a lot of it is familiar to our district. Work with the Core Collaborative, work with James Nottingham, work with others, Michael McDowell, who are all familiar to our district. The new one would be the Marzano Research Institute. They are the research branch of this effort, in that DESE and the state board really wanted to have a research component in an effort to ensure that we're on the right track in terms of continuing to look at the analytics and how students are performing, what are their goals going into the academic year, what are those stretch goals, and then certainly where do they end up at the end of that academic year. So that is a lot, 2 years worth of a journey condensed into about 8 slides. Sorry we weren't able to bring that up, but that's really all I had, Madam President, on that particular item to share.
Any questions?
From a timing standpoint, would the state board be looking at taking a vote on this at their June meeting, or what?
That is on the agenda.
Okay.
And so as of this afternoon, actually, a similar slide deck, there's about a 10-minute window on the agenda for the State Board of Education as far as a presentation.
Okay.
That will be followed by questions, which is what we did last summer in presenting to the State Board the recommendations of the work group. That meeting currently is scheduled for June 6th. So barring something happening, that's the intent. In addition, they will receive the full 100-page document that accompanies the last year and a half worth of work. That's embargoed until the end of this month, and then that will be a public-facing document as well. So.
And we've had time to discuss this over the last couple of months, so this isn't, when we vote on this, this isn't just great, thanks for that.
That's right.
We've studied it, we've processed it.
Yeah. And on that note, we shared with you back during our Friday update this last week some engagement opportunities that we've had along the way, connecting with our principals and presenting the information to our elementary, middle, and high school principals, our secondary curriculum committee, our elementary curriculum committee, in addition to the professional development committee, Vision 2020 committee the other night. I know Jackson was there for that. That doesn't include our coffee with the communities, our building level meetings, our study sessions, our board meetings, our education foundation presentations, community presentations, of which we've been kind of socializing this effort. And inevitably, if you sit back and get a deep understanding of MSIP, end of year assessments, as compared to what we're capable and already doing in our district and how we can personalize learning, the majority of the time people walk away with a better understanding, but then the realization, yeah, there is a better way. And there are other states that have figured that out. So it's been a journey, but certainly a lot of work and a lot of communicating to come for those districts that do participate in that demonstration project, because it is different.
So with those interactions, have there been any apprehensions? I mean, I don't think we've heard any amongst ourselves.
Sure.
Have you heard any?
The apprehension is for those that want it all done and detailed before you get going, which I'm recovering from that. I always prefer to have everything, I prefer to have everything lined up so that I know what I'm walking into. To that end, the 100-page document speaks to a lot of that. And then, of course, there's a lot of questions in terms of, what will professional learning look like? How do we measure this? How do we communicate it to families? What is our APR going to look like? How are other districts going to sort up against us and what we're doing? Because it is different. Keep in mind, there will be districts that are still on the MSIP 6 model, whereas there will be those 20 or so districts that participate that will be on this new system. The goal being, each year, you're recruiting more districts to then get involved in the Success Ready Students Network so that you can inform the next MSIP process, whatever it's called, the next accreditation and assessment structure. As a side note, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is due to let out an RFP for a new assessment in the 24-25 school year. And about 12 years ago, the state and the legislature, I think it was around 10 or 12 years ago, asked for about $26 million to create through-year assessments. And that was working its way through the budgeting process and was gutted and reduced to about $7 million, where we held with the traditional end-of-year MAP and end-of-year high school assessments. So we've attempted to go down that path before, unsuccessfully. What happened since then? A lot of districts integrated their own through-year assessment systems, as we have done. So it's really been a 10 to 15-year conversation of how do we know there's a better way of doing things, how do we actually get that through? And frankly, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education doesn't have a staffing capacity. That's why so much of this is coming from the field.
I think you did a really wonderful, I don't know how you summarized all of that so quickly, but you did. I think the one thing that hit me just in some of the reviews, that this is a teacher retention issue as well, because the State Blue Ribbon Commission that we had to look at how do we recruit and retain high-quality teachers in Missouri, one of the things identified by that commission was the importance of meaningful assessment. So I think moving along this track also helps us with this other goal that we have of being in a position to compete for talent.
That's right. And I appreciate you mentioning the Blue Ribbon Commission, because you're exactly right in terms of the feedback received. Another point to the Blue Ribbon Commission was a desire to improve student engagement. And so student engagement goes up historically when you connect it to real-world application. So currently we don't have that in MSIP. This takes that and puts it at the forefront and honors students for engaging in internships and Northland CAPS and our educator internship program, and really incentivizes that. The absence of it in MSIP, in fact, is a disincentive, because you aren't rewarded for that through your accreditation and accountability system. So the student engagement is another key piece as it relates to the Blue Ribbon Commission.
Well, and when you have that student engagement, they just perform better. And they get into, they're more involved and they want more information, and they, they enjoy it more.
That's right. It's more meaningful.
Any other comments? Does the resolution have to be read? Okay, good.
I move the board adopt the board resolution on participation in the Success Ready Students Network System Design Zone Demonstration Project with federal waiver request.
Second.
Nick?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
On to new business.
A few items under new business. 6.1, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through safety and security program and opportunities we have to expand that work. If you've followed along over the last 9 years, there have been a lot of improvements within that area. So we'll let Mr. Anderson kind of walk us through the discussion as we wrap up this year and really ready for next year.
Thank you. So there's just a few slides I'll walk through. The first one you've seen before, this is just to kind of get your bearings over the last 30 years of the program when it first started. But before I get into the details of how the program has evolved, I think it's important to kind of take a look at how this community's changed in the population. That first line from for over 30 years for Liberty has grown by 10,000, but the population of the district has went from 24,000 to 63,000. LPS enrollment has changed from 4,400 to 12,700. percentage of our population, Liberty versus Kansas City, that has dropped tremendously, cut in half. The number of schools in Liberty has expanded up to 15, and of course now we have 4 schools in Kansas City. And again, that's a 30-year kind of quick, but I think gives you a sense that this community has changed quite a bit over those 30 years. There's a lot here, but I think that what I'll do is I'll do this in chunks that, first of all, that 93 through the bid, that should be the odds there, sorry. We did just have a small program in place. And we had a part-time director, we had an SRO. And then there was a next period of time, all the way up until about 2014, 2015, where a couple of SROs were added. We added off-duty highway patrol to assist with cash collections. And then we also had some off-duty LPD on occasion in our parking lots at the high schools. Where everything started to change is about 13, 14, and 15. I think the first thing that's worth noting, I kind of thought of this coming up here, is there's none of the board members that were here in that 13, 14 measure where all the secure entries became a big part of the district. And so when I arrived in 14, along with Dr. Tucker and a few others, it was seen through the construction of those secure entries. And that was really the first, I think, major move in some time. Of course, we've now finished all those secure entries across the district, but that was a big major step in the community. In addition to that, we hired a full-time director. That was in 15, and that was a very necessary move given the changing environment, the changing growth of the community. We knew we had to have a full-time dedicated leader in the program. I won't go through all these, but there was a lot of focus on operating procedures and systems, hiring some team members, developing a threat assessment protocol, upgrading our cameras and radio systems, and all this work, of course, continues. Training regimens for our staff as well. In 18, we had a fairly big change, and again, I think for those who've been around for some of this time, you've seen me from time to time update you with some of these changes, but in 18, we had the high school SRO leave the district, and with that created an opportunity to bring in our own LPS security, some internal security officers. It's noted here, and I think it's worth repeating and emphasizing that all of our internal security folks are either former or retired PD. They go through all the training programs that are necessary to become a police officer, and they keep up with all their certifications and commissions by annual training that they go through. So that was in 18. In 19, the year after that, we decided it was important to add some security during the PM hours at our high schools and to the academy. So that was another change for us to identify, I think what we felt was probably our primary concern at that point was that those high schools were open all into the evening and not having security there was a concern. Flash forward to last year, it would have been last March, I believe, I was in front of you, and at that time we decided with the retirement of one of our SROs, we decided to go ahead and bring dedicated security personnel into each of our middle level buildings. So now that's been in place for over a year. And I would say just kind of the look back, and we do this annually. We meet I meet with Gary and some of his folks. We do assess and evaluate kind of how the program has been shaping up and how it's been working. We really feel good that as this has grown over time, it's been a successful model for us. We've hired good people, and they've done good work, and there are people, which I think helps us in some regards. And I think we attract good staff because they want to become part of the LPS community. With that said, now we're into this current, the next phase. If you were here last year, last March, we talked about the likely anticipated next phase would be to expand into elementary buildings. At the time, what we weren't sure of is that would be a more gradual, maybe we get halfway there and then we grow it to every school. Then one thing happened that was very helpful and significant. That was the passage of the debt service levy transfer that gave us the capacity. And of course, Ms. Sullivan and I, Dr. Tugger, have been in regular conversations about this over time, is to potentially earmark some dollars to allow for the expansion of the program. Initially, halfway, and then we also started looking to go ahead and add into each building. And that, of course, is what we've proposed. This item, there's no voting on this item, but we certainly would appreciate any feedback. But effectively what this would do is this would put in every one of our school buildings a dedicated armed security officer. The high schools, that would extend into the PM hours. We'd also add a mobile security officer. We already have 2. We would add a 3rd that really helps us and is necessary when people are sick or they have to take some time off, bereavement or otherwise. So provide some added cover in addition to creating some flexibility through the course of the day. And then we also are proposing taking a couple of our, or 3 of our existing positions and elevating them to a supervisor position. And that's with all the additional staff to make sure that we're properly supervising and conducting performance reviews as is required. So in sum, the new program at the very end, there's 25 armed security staff, 1 assigned to each building, with the 1 SRO who's still with us, new Officer Cronin, and then we have the 9 safety monitors who are unarmed. They're kind of the graduated hall monitors, but they've become part of our safety and security department, which has been helpful. And then the last slide I have is just a quick kind of updated organizational chart that shows you the entirety of the program with those 3 security supervisors and that light blue line across the top. All the dark blue indicates the new positions, and then the asterisks identify those who are armed. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. The only action actually was within the consent agenda, and that was the updated salary schedule, which included the security supervisor position. That was really the only step necessary for you all tonight.
Just seeing this chart, Mr. Anderson, that security supervisor over elementary and middle school has a lot of reports.
They do. We talked quite a bit about that, and Mr. Majors, and I agree with him, the heavy lift is at those high schools.
Sure.
That's where the threat assessments are, that's where a lot of the work is and a lot of the engagement is. And so this could evolve over time, but he and I had a good conversation about that, and he felt pretty strongly this was the right model to get started.
And then we're going to maintain that pursuit of former retired police department individuals for these roles, right?
That's correct. To date, we've only accepted former or retired.
Yep. Yeah. And then within the elementary schools, they're going to maintain the same attire of khakis, blue polo.
That's correct. It'd be the polos and khakis, and as time we evaluate all these things with the program. But yeah, that's the current plan.
Okay.
And then I should have mentioned, we did spend quite a bit of time. We met with some of the elementary principals. Dr. Moore was involved. Yeah. One of the things that we were uncertain of is plugging in these elementary officers and what are they going to do all day?
Right.
In addition to obviously protecting the building and the staff and students within the building. They've come up with some pretty neat, creative ways to get them really engaged with the students, and maybe winning award for lunch or tutoring, reading tutoring. And so I feel pretty good about the intentionality that's gone into how to bring them into those buildings, and feel like we've got a good plan to do that.
Just playing off what Nick was talking about with that bulk under that security supervisor, with the middle schools, I guess I'm a little, 1 per middle school, 4 in the high schools, 1 in elementary, 1 in middle school. I don't know, it just seems to me, I guess I'm a little bit questioning whether it seems as the elementary may not have a whole lot, but those middle schools seems like that's quite a bit for the middle schools, and whether that makes more sense connecting them with the more of the high school business model.
That's a conversation we had, is if we were to split that. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if that happened over time, because that's the logical way to do that, and we did talk about that.
And it's moving from 2 SROs that covered 4 middle schools to that model like we've done now. And then you still have your LPD SRO that is working all campuses, right?
Correct.
So that's the 1 roving SRO is still part of
We still
this?
have that connection.
It's not on this chart, but yeah, it's
with Liberty Police Department, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is primarily the middle schools, though, right? Is the SRO still
Well,
focused?
With Officer Cronin onboarding, I think as that transition occurs with Officer Bradsher, I know Mr. Majors has been encouraging kind of, he has to stay on the Liberty side, of course.
Sure.
But encouraging him to kind of move about the district and to visit all buildings on the Liberty side.
Okay.
Which I anticipate that will occur.
Yeah.
Do we have someone on the Kansas City side that does that?
We do not, except as is needed, but we do not have a Kansas City SRO. And Thankfully, I guess, the only sites on the Kansas City side are elementary schools, so they don't often need kind of that regular, and the one distinction with the SRO versus our folks is the arrest powers. That's the main distinction. But certainly if there is an issue, we call on KCPD, they're a great partner, and they'll come in and assist.
I don't know if there's any, I know programming-wise, historically with the middle schools, there's been stuff with the SROs, which doesn't matter in this situation because they're all on the Liberty side, but if there are any learnings or programs that we, deem important to put in place from the SRO on this Liberty side, I know you guys will think about it, but how do we implement those for those 4 elementary schools over on the Kansas City side as well?
Agreed.
Steve, what do the numbers tell you? I mean, incidents, is there some numbers that you and Majors looked at?
Well, I think there's a big part of this is presence within the buildings and to be there in the event, right, that something were to go wrong. The other part clearly is the relationship building that occurs within, and we've seen this over the past several years. It's really been a strong suit of the program, and the information we learn and gather and kind of directing issues that pop up from time to time. I think the number of incidents has increased over time. I don't have that data in front of me, but certainly the demand to have more staff on the ready to respond is always helpful. I think the coverage at each site is a significant upgrade. So prior to elementary, if there was something that were to happen, we have to draw them away from nearby other buildings or a mobile officer, and that the coordination of that, and then you can potentially leave one of the other sites vacant. So it fills those gaps.
And keep in mind, you have the student component, the staff component, the parent component, but then also, I'll say, neighborhood aspect, where there are things that go on in and around the neighborhood. Where we had something not too long ago at one of our elementary schools that happened on the sidewalk.
I recall.
And police needed to respond, right? So you've got the ability of this safety and security staff person to be able to support the principal and administration, but then also interface with law enforcement on a lot of fronts. The one thing I want to share too is that the intent is for them not to handle and manage student discipline infractions. Right? That still sits with the principal and the assistant principal. Now they may be called in to observe or for various roles, but that still resides primarily with that administrator.
I greatly appreciate that. I've appreciated the attention that you've given and that Gary Majors has given to that concept of training not only our staff, but the incoming security team about what the role is and what it isn't and what it looks like in a school setting. And then I appreciate continued focus on how we make sure that our staff members that are in buildings understand that as well, so that we have clarity of purpose around that, and that it's memorialized, and that staff members are evaluated on that. So I appreciate all of that.
Well, I'm going to bring up something about the uniform, because you said, will they continue to be in the blue polo shirt and khaki? And I guess for me, we've had this conversation that I feel like they should look different. I feel like visually they should look different than a blue shirt and khakis. So I know a full uniform might not be the right answer, but I feel like maybe an all-black uniform, something that differentiates them from a vendor or a teacher or a parent I understand it's approachable, but it also doesn't differentiate them from anyone else. So I feel like that's an important consideration as well while we're making a transition.
And I assume in addition to the funding the salaries and benefits, that there would be training.
Correct.
So that's going to be ramped up. And what about facilities? Would there be need for dedicated space? I mean, I know they're primarily assigned to building, but bringing them together for their own training?
Currently, the mobile officers have kind of in their open support services, they've moved around a little bit. Not too long ago, they were making room for the tennis courts. So as part of our space planning under the bond and some of the support facilities, we're creating a dedicated space for security. But it doesn't have to be very large because they report directly to their buildings. Yeah.
Other comments? items for Mr. Anderson. Again, no action this evening. Again, appreciate the community and the support and our ability to expand the program as we've desired to do all these years. And you can see from the early 90s to present, it has evolved. And we appreciate the partnership with all the agencies that ensure safety and security of our students and staff. Looking ahead in regard to our board retreat, further conversation in terms of possible agenda item, and then looking at approving our budget in June that then puts this in motion. So thank you, Mr. Anderson, for sharing this evening, and Mr. Majors as well for all the thought that has gone into that. 6.2 then is our preliminary budget, and Ms. Sullivan's going to come back up and walk us through that. As you'll recall, March, revenues, April, expenditures, May, preliminary budget, June, final budget, July, it's wrong. Because we know that it's constantly evolving, so sorry to beat you to your... That's your opening statement. We've worked together long enough, we know, so we'll turn it over to you. I'll be quiet.
No, that's good. That's exactly what, you probably saw the notes on there, exactly what we do. So this is part 3. You also have uploaded for you or posted on the site is the preliminary budget document. I would like to point out that it's not complete. There are components that are missing from it that are not able to be complete because of the bond issue. So we have left those pages out because they would not be whole. There's also a budget message that will be included with next month's complete budget document. So the documents that you do have support the slides that you will see tonight. I also want to point out that the slides that you see tonight, I will tell you where the holes are, but because we did not get the closing documents for the bond sale until about 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon, it was too late for me to incorporate it into the document and get everything finalized in the Keystone system and sent out to Audit and Finance Committee and posted for you. So we're kind of operating on a different plane here. I'll tell you where they're wrong, but they're wrong, and in June it'll be wrong anyway. So just like Dr.
It'll be wrong the
Tucker
day
said.
after.
It'll be out of date. So anyway, we'll move on with that. As always with the preliminary budget and in the budget you approve in June, we will still be waiting for assessed valuation estimates. Federal program and grant allocations, those are not posted typically by the time you adopt a budget. We will not know summer school ADA, which affects our final formula payments for next year because summer school hasn't occurred yet. And of course, then we're still dealing with a little bit of inflation. So those are some of the things that are the unknowns that we will be dealing with after you pass this budget. The first slide you see here is the budget development statutory requirements, and these are included in Board Policy DB. I will not read them to you, but the bolded pieces are the pieces that are required by statute to be in our budget document, and of course they are in all of them, the documents that you have tonight. Everything but the budget message and the budget summary are included. Those will be added at the June presentation. So the first thing that we will talk about is the total budget for all funds on the revenue side. So currently overall, it shows just a $1.3 million increase from the FY23 estimated actual. And you'll note that over 1/2 of the district's total revenue sources are from local sources. You will also note that there is a decrease in federal revenue of about $3 million, and that's due to ESSER funds primarily. So you'll notice that's a bit of a change. As I indicated, not reflected in this slide is the revenue from the sale of bonds. So approximately $127 million, which you saw presented to you earlier from Mr. Kinder tonight, will be reflected in the other revenue category. So at this point, you will see that once you add bond funds to the total revenue picture, it becomes a little bit uncomparable. So anytime you add bonds, things change a little bit. So that's why we will focus more on the next slide, which is the operating funds. And you will see an increase of $9.5 million in the operating fund revenue budget. The main sources of that operating revenue are local property taxes and state basic formula. The growth in the revenue is primarily projected because of the increase in property value assessed valuation and the debt service levy transfer. So that accounts for the majority of the increase in revenue. Again, you will see federal revenue is all operating, and it did decrease again for the same reason of the ESSER funds that are all depleted. Since local revenue is our largest source of revenue, I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about that today. On the operating side, it's going to increase by $13.9 million. $5.5 million of that is due to assessed valuation growth projected at 10%. The other $8.4 million is because of the levy transfer. On this slide, we talk about the assumptions of the consumer price index. We know in December that is what is used to predict the levy, to calculate the levy, which you will vote on in September, and it was 8%. In most years that are reassessment years, we will talk about the Hancock provision that drives down or puts a cap on the amount of revenue that we can grow by. But in the year that you made a levy transfer and it passed, the Hancock provision does not apply. So we get all of that growth. So in effect, that raises our tax ceiling, even though we won't have a tax increase, but we get to take all of that growth. So we will realize all of that 8%. So it was a good year to make all of that happen. So we do appreciate our patrons voting that in. But that is what accounts for, the bulk of that $8.4 million part of that income. As I said, our historical collection rate is about 98%, which I said earlier tonight that we've increased over that this year. So we may be able to increase that a little bit in future years when we budget going on. And the pictures at the bottom just tell you how the property is assessed. So personal property is assessed at 33% of the assessed valuation. Commercial is at 32%. Residential is at 19%, and agriculture is 12%. And where that becomes important is when you see this piece, because residential is clearly our highest category of assessed valuation. And as I just said, we only get 19% of that assessed valuation, market value. So the commercial piece is where we really would like to see it higher, because we get 32% of that in revenue. So this slide just depicts why our tax base doesn't go as far as some other districts, because we're high with residential properties.
So in comparison to our other two peer districts in the Northland, they would have a very different blue bar.
Yes.
Much lower.
Yes. Their commercial bar would be higher than
Yes.
the blue bar. Yes. So they would generate a little more revenue than we would.
Yep.
On the same assessed valuation.
And
You said higher
in one
than the blue bar?
instance, with fewer students.
Yes.
Yes.
The blue bar would be lower.
Yep.
Okay.
The greenish bar, the commercial bar, would be at equal or higher.
Okay.
So one does have fewer students. They generate quite a bit more revenue than we. Our neighbor directly beside us has a much larger area, much larger population, and therefore generates much more revenue than we do.
Gotcha.
So, and this is where the majority of our, we talk a lot about TIF. We have very little TIF property left in the scheme of the whole.
Sure.
Where most of our commercial property is right now is in Chapter 100 status.
Yes.
And there's the bulk of the Heartland Meadows project, the Ford plants, and all of that to the south. Amazon did not take their Chapter 100 or TIF, so we do get revenue on that. But the majority of those developments are in Chapter 100 status, so we don't see any revenue, nor are the assessed valuations even reflected on the notices that we get from the collector. So we rely on the county to provide us that number. And there's some speculation that it's really not a true number, because it's at the level that it was incentivized, and it's never been grown for increasing property values. So to find that real number is a little bit tricky. So I don't really have that number to give you. But if and when all of that property starts rolling off of Chapter 100. If it's not put back into a Chapter 100, we could see the green bar grow. But that could happen, what's it, 3 years? Before some of it starts rolling out of Chapter 100. So we'll see what happens at that point if they do more projects and it rolls back in. But we'll see.
Is there a time limit on the Chapter 100s?
10 years.
Okay.
Some extended 15, and now I think I've even seen ones up at 20, so
Majority of ours are 10.
Initial round of people can.
Okay.
And we'll have some TIFs rolling on, too.
Right.
Right.
The majority of our TIFs are starting to roll off. The Shoal Creek Valley project, which we get pilot payments on, was the largest part of our TIF. And those are, the biggest part of that rolled off 2 years ago, so they are continuing to roll off small parcels of that. Those TIFs are expiring, so.
Montage or Ardara, I think that's, if that does come forward, you're right.
Yeah.
We'll see. That'd be the next probably big tip.
For 23 years, I'm assuming the maximum.
Yeah. Yeah. So this, I always show this slide out of posterity. It's just the indication of where we've been and when we did dip down into negative assessed valuation. And then you see that big 26% pop up there. And this is an interesting point that happened because we did have a change in assessor at this time. And we also had the state of Missouri being proactive about writing the assessed valuation in the state. So there is a little bit of significance as to why that happened at that time. And we are predicting 10% increase. I have not been able to get any better word out of the assessor. I did make a run at him again a couple of weeks ago and did talk to them again. And they're still, 10 to 13%, maybe 15. So we'll really just have to wait until June or July when we get those preliminary assessed valuation numbers. The other big piece of local revenue that we receive is in basic formula classroom trust fund, so that's foundation formula. The assumptions are all exactly the same this year as they were in the past year. Since FY22 was considered to be affected attendance-wise by the pandemic, we have the ability when we project our formula payment to look back 2 years or base it on the current year's estimated attendance. And since FY22 is in that 2-year look back, and they are saying that it was affected by the pandemic, we are still under the pandemic provision allowed to get state formula payments based on the highest of FY20, 21, 22, 23, or projected 24 to base our state payment on. Since we are in a little bit of a declining enrollment situation, FY20 is still our largest year for ADA, average daily attendance, and weighted average daily attendance, which are used to calculate the formula. So we will be using FY20 for our formula next year. That's why on the operating projection spreadsheet, you will see formula flat for this year to next year. And then you'll notice in 25, we have to go back to regular calculations. So we will be using, I think, FY22 to calculate, or 23 to calculate the formula, because since we're declining, our second year back is typically going to be our highest weighted ADA used to calculate formula. But we have taken that into account. So going forward, that declining number is projected into all of our future operating projections. And this is just the latest demographer information that we have back from the fall of 21 that shows for FY24, they were projecting a decline of 24, and then in 25 it's negative 119 and so on. So it's relatively flat, so there will be a little change, but not a huge change in that formula payment, unless the foundation formula, formula has changed, so more to come on that, I'm sure. So to cap up revenue, the primary changes, and I was telling somebody earlier that There are just a couple of big things. There were the bond sales and the levy transfer, and everything else this year is pretty status quo. We haven't had a lot of big changes in programming or things being taken away or added. So the budget, other than the bond and the levy transfer, it's pretty benign this year as far as things you're going to see shifting around. So the big increases, property tax revenue, Prop C revenue, decreases with interest rates possibly falling. We did go ahead and take that down. We will not be receiving any more ARP or ESSER funds, so that's a $3 million decrease. Pilot and M&M pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. So when we do have a TIF, if it's they can pay us through a pilot payment, that TIF money, which Shoal Creek Valley does, those are falling off. The M&M surtax is decreasing because voters voted to take that rate down in this past fall. And then miscellaneous local revenue, we have a Kaufman grant expiring, and as we've talked about in the past, we decreased the Children's Services Fund revenue a little bit just because we do not have services that meet the needs and the money that we need to spend on that. We don't have providers that are providing those services right now. They're full, and so we decreased that revenue knowing that we probably won't be able to spend it 100%. Before I move on to the next slide, do you have any questions about revenue?
So the interest income decrease that you show, that doesn't account for potential interest we could earn based upon the bond cash?
No. This
So-
does not, this
Okay.
is of our operating funds
As
only.
it sits.
No bond money.
Okay.
Because that will be a huge increase.
Right.
As we go over the next 3 years. I anticipate that number, but by the time it's all said and done, to be between $5 and $6 million. So that would be reflected year by year.
Right.
And once we work with MOCAT to get that investment scheduled out, I will have better numbers to put in the budget for that as well. Based
So
on
will you have
timing.
that by June?
I hope so.
Okay.
I can't guarantee that I will. We met with them, like I said, last week, so they'll be putting that into their program that they calculate that, and I need to look at it before I give them the go-ahead to invest those funds. So chances are, yes, I'll have a much better idea, but that will be reflected in debt service and capital instead of operating funds. So right here, we're just primarily talking operating funds.
And on the decrease portion, as it relates to Clay County?
Yes.
And the decision to pull the surtax
Yes.
tax rate back?
Yes.
To quantify that as far as specific dollar amount that the district does not receive. Do you have that number?
I don't have that
Okay.
number in front of me tonight. I can get that number.
And it differed among all of the districts within Clay County, but then also taxing jurisdictions as that surtax tax rate was reduced. You may remember those conversations earlier with Clay County, which Cindy and I engaged along with other districts and other municipalities. That's captured in the total reflected.
It is.
Okay.
Yes. I want to say it's around $200,000 of that number, but I don't recall right off the top of my head.
And that pilot decrease goes into the property tax revenue,
It does.
presumably, right? Yeah.
So
Increase.
what happens, that assessed valuation that you'll see on the TIF line, that assessed valuation will roll up into the regular
Yep.
property line. However, what the hardest part about when it rolls off TIF all goes into operating revenue.
Sure.
When that assessed valuation flips up to being fully taxed, then it has to go to debt service and capital as well as operating. So there will still be a minimal effect on operating because we won't get that whole pilot amount.
Fair.
But yes, we will still receive that revenue in future years. And it's already accounted for up there now.
Right, right.
Yeah. So it's really a net, very little
Yep.
decrease. Yeah. All right. Debt service and capital revenue budgets. You can see that debt service decreased the way it sits right now here on this slide by $7 million. And that's due to the levy transfer. So you'll recall we're taking 50 cents of the debt service levy, moving it to operating. So that will cause a decrease in debt service revenue. As Mr. Kinder indicated earlier, we have a very healthy balance in our debt service, which is why we were able to move that 50 cents to operating and continue being able to make our debt service payments. So that was to be expected and something that we had planned for. So we also, since that balance is going to be dipping because we are making payments out of debt service, we did take the investment earnings down just a little bit. You will see the interest earned on the bonds in capital. Bond fund is a sub-fund of the capital fund, so those will be lumped together in financial reporting. However, we will be providing a separate bond fund report to you every month, so you will see what those earnings are as we go along. Capital projects fund, we did have an increase in property tax revenue there just due to the increase in assessed valuation. We also had a decrease because we did not have devices to sell this year like we've had in the past. So that's overall a net decrease of 1.1 million projected in the capital account. Now on FY23, you will see the the capital revenue pop up by $127 million because next week we will get that money in the revenue side of this bond account, FY23. So that slide will be different in the final book. All right, we're going to hit the revenue budget or the expenditure budget. So this is the picture as it sets right now for the expenditures for all funds. And you will notice that at the bottom line, it increased by $68 million. We have $27.7 million of bond projects already in the budget for next year because that's what the draw schedule indicates that we will be able to do next year. So we knew that number, so we put that number in. We also knew that we would be paying off those lease purchases for about $27.9 million in debt service payments. So right there, you have $54 million of that $68 million increase directly related to the bond projects and the debt restructuring. The other increases that are major in the expenditure budget were, of course, the salary increases, which all told with the levy transfer and the enhancements to salary schedules, plus additional staff and additional benefits are $11.6 million in salaries, $1.7 million in benefits, and then we also had a $1.5 million increase in supply costs. So that accounts for the majority of that $68 million increasing in all funds for the budget of expenditures. And then you will see the increase on the 23 side in the book for the pay down of the lease purchase certificates, which will happen next week as well. So you'll see that happen, changing this slide.
Of which all the percentages year over year are so wonky.
Yeah.
Just because of that, right?
Yep, and that's, here again, it's just like the revenue. When you look at the whole budget,
Yep.
and you have bond funds, it's going to not paint a picture that's really comparable. That's why you want to look at operating expenditures because bond funds are outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is the slide where you want to look at the comparables as far as between categories.
Yep.
And this budget increased by $14.5 million. That's your operating expenditure budget. And again, that's primarily for budgeting for steps, column movement, enhancements to schedules, and additional staff, as well as the benefits. And you'll note that salaries and benefits this year are 78.63% of operating expenditures. Last year they were 77.45. So we're right there in the same percentage of budget. And most districts that don't contract out any services are somewhere between the 77 and 80% of their budget are salaries and benefits. So we're right on track with where we've been in the past and with where school districts in Missouri are that pay for all of their services. If a district has a lower percentage, chances are they contract out transportation or nutrition services, or custodial service, or something else that we pay for. Purchase services, we had a slight decrease, but those shifted to supplies. So overall, on the operating side of the budget, there's $1 million increase combined, and actually this is mainly due to rising prices. So things stay pretty status quo with enrollment maintaining where it is. Those expenditures didn't need to go up according to people that budgeted for those.
So that material supply increase, like 9%, it looks like something like that. Is that, you said that's just cost of doing business this year versus last year?
And about $650,000 of it, honestly, is in utilities.
Utilities.
Yes.
Wow.
Gas, primarily. Yeah. So it is the cost of doing business and keeping the lights on. So, and that's
the heat on.
The heat on, yes. And that's reflected in.
At least you didn't buy it in Texas.
In this slide right here. So salaries, the primary expenditure changes, salaries, benefits, and utilities. So everything else is pretty status quo. And here we've talked about this. Debt service budget is only for paying off principal and interest on bonded indebtedness. So I was able to include a big chunk of that in next year's budget. So this slide shouldn't change too much since I knew what that would be. In capital expenditure budgets, it stayed pretty consistent with last year. Most of any change in a capital budget would be now absorbed by the bond. So we were able to maintain a pretty even footing on the capital budget. And when the leases decreased, we did absorb that into the capital projects. So we were able to do as promised and keep that money in capital instead of putting it up into operating. So the things that weren't on the bond project list, hopefully we'll still be able to knock some of those off with that freed up $2.5 million that we are not spending on lease payments next year. So I know that was confusing just because of the flux of the place that we're at. So when you do see the book next month, it will be complete and we'll have all of the pieces in it. So that's where we're at, and we'll have the complete picture for you next month. Do you have any questions for me?
Great job.
Thank you.
Well, and then thanks to the department, Business Services Department, but then also what you don't see is all the meetings behind the scenes with those that are responsible for budgets. So
yes.
Principals, directors, capital projects is a big portion of that.
It is.
Working with Steve and his team. So thanks to everybody that's had their hands in getting us to the point that we're at this evening.
Truly is a team
So,
effort.
yeah.
Team effort all the way.
Lots of bird dogging.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
6.3 then is an item as far as our perpetual calendar, really, in bringing curriculum to you for your consideration. This evening you have presented to you for first read. You'll see it again for action and your consideration in June. And that is the curriculums tied to science, social studies, and fine arts. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Westphal.
I promise, I know Cindy had like 73 slides, so I'll get through the 62
Wow.
as fast as I can.
Wow.
Okay, so just to go over a couple things, the things that you'll see when you click on all the links that we provided you, but just talking about it, we have learning intentions and success criteria. It's part of our transition to the SRSN work, right, with competency, essential standards pacing. So we've moved from the direct instruction of all 167 standards, for example, in the content area, down to those essential standards following a pattern that we set before DESE even started that. We also work through what resources we use primarily in this district. We do still focus on open educational resources. And then we align our assessments using our proficiency reporting guides, which is our what we would call our grading or measure student reporting of grades through competencies. So just to remind you, May is the first read, and we actually have more than those, though. Sorry, I didn't update that before I sent it off. But the first one is 912 Visual Arts. So back in April of 2019, the state passed new standards for fine arts, and this is the last set. So we sent this to you. I know you all know that work is my love language, so I'm about to give you some homework, meaning I love you.
Is that a love language?
It is.
Okay.
And so the first group of love that I'm sharing with you are all the courses in the final 912 submission from a group that Aaron Money worked with, and that would be, the crew that did that is Mick Turpin, Catherine Gerline, Matthew Phipps, and then Mr. Money. So this is the last installment of our fine arts curriculum since that big swap. So if you have any questions on any of these links, if you really want to take a peek at them, then please just give me a call or send me an email and we can touch base. The next one is a little bit easier and really fun, which is our elementary science. We had a team of K-5 teachers come together and work on components that supplement our Project Lead the Way learning modules that we give, and they are paced out throughout the year. So each one of those is a link that takes you to the district website for all of their curriculum. That is included also this year with social studies. So we are starting the work in social studies. We are still going to work on it through the summer because there are some gaps in our curriculum that we need to fill with some modules that we create. So that's going to be ongoing, but the curriculum pacing and everything is still there. Finally, if you click on all those big words, you will get to the middle school competencies. All those are there, all 4 core you will see there, but you really only want to focus on science and social studies because that's what we're doing this time. But if you're curious about ELA and or math, they are both there as well. And last but not least, high school science. So those are the courses that are there. Just to remind you, if the courses show up in orange, that means on our website that they are supported by the resources of Open Educational Resources. So we do not carry a textbook for them anymore. We use curated resources for those courses. If they're in blue, they're usually supported by a text, typically digital, not only print. Okay? And same thing for high school social studies. Those are finalized. The one thing we will be incorporating, piloting next year, is the new legislative requirement for the Holocaust instruction. So we're aware of that, and Dr. Moore has got her team working on that, getting it ready for them. So there you go. Those are my 67 slides. We will look at this again in June for our final approval. So again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And then next summer, set that up so you can see what you get. We get to go back to PE and health and international languages, so that'll be fun. And that's it.
So all these ones that currently don't have links will have links?
Which ones don't have links?
Well,
The
elementary
elementary.
social studies.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I will make sure you have links.
Okay.
Thank you. Check those.
And several of the science too.
I will make sure Denise has that to give that to you because it's not, I noticed that at the beginning, so. Yes, I will make sure you have it. Thank you. I don't want you to miss this. This is really fun.
Oh, been looking forward to it.
It is enjoyable.
The other piece is the public-facing aspect of our curriculum, which is on our webpage.
Yeah, it is, all of them are, like, this is just a quick find for you, but everything that we have is public-facing on that index. If you use the chart that you can see, it is the one way. So if you go to academics and then curriculum instruction, the very first link is, it's called Essential Curriculum. Every course that we offer is listed there. It's elementary, middle, and high, and it's core first and then electives. But these are the ones, I tried to pull them together so you didn't have to search around, but they are all live there as well, because that's where I pulled them from. Thank you.
So your homework, as Dr. Westphal shared, between now and the June meeting, that's why we are pushing the June meeting back. Not really. Give you another week to drum up on curriculum. I do appreciate you showing this last slide. Those two look pretty young.
I know, right? I started to move it out, and then I left it there. I was like, oh, that's
I didn't see as much gray in David's hair. Between now and the June meeting, certainly if you have questions or thoughts or comments, please let us know.
Yeah.
I know Dr. Westphal can assist in any way that you need.
Huge shout out to our teams. Elementary has teams that come together. At the middle and high level, we use our curriculum council representatives to lead the work, and they make sure it brings in. And then, of course, our innovation and learning coaches are always behind the scenes making the magic happen, so. Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Westphal.
Thank you.
Last item then under new business is 6.4 agreements, purchases, and bids, and we will turn it over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through a few items.
Thank you. Two items. One, an agreement with Niles Prep. This is under the emergency provisions under policy BJF-1. That was we need to get some services for a special ed student. There was a Friday update in late April on that. And then the second item is the Kelly Services agreement. This was initially under consent. We pulled it out since we pulled out an extension. And this is just kind of our annual update with Kelly. It includes new rates. But then we also, if you recall, we did work with them a little bit to rebalance out some of the indemnification clauses within the agreement. We got Mr. Captain's office is working very closely with the Kelly folks, and they were very satisfied to get that cleaned up. So that's also embedded in here. The actual changes were pretty minor when you look at the language, but I think it accomplished the goal. So with that, we can take any question.
No, I should know this. Do we have a separate master services agreement with Kelly Services, or is it just all within this annual?
I think it's just in this one.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I move the board approve the agreements with Niles Prep and Kelly Services, Inc.
Second?
Denise?
Nick?
Yes.
Jen? Yes. AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Abstain.
Motion carries.
That takes us to legislation and advocacy.
Sine die. It's done.
Did you have to do the Latin? And then upcoming dates, the board retreat is the 8th. Also, picture day.
Yes, ma'am.
And the 27th is the regular board meeting. And I think, yes, MSBA Summer Summit is in Branson, the 16th and the 17th. Any board remarks?
And the retreat is at high school?
Liberty High School, yeah, in the new addition, in the view, same spot as we had it last time, so, yeah.
Thanks for that explanation, because it's not on there, and I didn't even think about it. If there's no remarks, motion?
I move the board adjourn.
Second?
Denise?
Nick?
Yes.
Jen? Yes. AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, welcome to the side of the room.
All right.